You are now listening to EdYOUcate, the most fired up educational podcast there is. EdYOUcate is all about the quality education access to students and how we can provide research-based solutions to free the young minds of the world. On this podcast, we will be exploring different educational experiences, education's greatest of debates, and more. The hottest educational podcast out. EdYOUcate is brought to you from the Albany State University's very own Center for Educational Opportunity. Enjoy.
All right, so for today's episode, we will be discussing the topic of educational policy in K-12 schools. We have our special guest today, Dr. Erica DeCuir. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and just give them a little bit more background information about who you are and what you do?
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Erica DeCuir. I'm an associate professor of teacher education at the unsinkable Albany State University, and I work as well as a director of the Aspiring Teachers Academy, and I am the co-PI on a Noyce Teaching Fellows grant that seeks to recruit and train STEM educators to work in high-needs schools. I am very, very happy to be with you here today and with your listening audience.
Thank you for that. So I would like to dive into my first question and just ask, what is your experience with K-12 schools?
I've worked as a teacher, so I began teaching back in 2001, which was the dawn of No Child Left Behind. I walked into a school that was in a frenzy because we were adjusting and making changes in order to meet AYP, in order to get our students to pass their annual tests, as well as to make sure that all of our teachers were highly qualified. So I began teaching at a high school within that high stakes testing context. I have no institutional knowledge before the teaching field about what it was like when we did not have testing. So I've always worked in a high stakes testing context, in a high need school context. I've worked at the middle school and high school level, began teaching in New Orleans, Louisiana, and then taught in New York City. I did some international teaching for a couple of months, and then also taught in Atlanta. And finally, I am now working as a teacher educator here in Albany, Georgia.
Okay, wow. So how has teaching in the schools and also being an associate professor shape your viewpoint or your mindset about K-12 schools and public schooling and, all of the traditional schools?
Well, my experience tells me that there are some really good teachers who are in the public school system. There's some excellent teachers. The curriculum, however, is much stricter than people, the general public, recognize. The teachers are beholden to their curriculum standards for their state. And if they're teaching in a tested subject, such as math or ELA, the curriculum as well as the instruction and assessment can be regimented and scripted, and they do not have a lot of flexibility or control to do things differently. So a lot of people outside of the school system believe that, it's the teachers. If there's an issue with the school system, it's the teachers. If there's an issue with certain students or certain student groups, or why one group is not getting opportunities, if there's an issue around equity, they tend to look at the teachers. And inside the school system, we know that in many cases, the teachers have very little control and flexibility over what is taught and how it is taught. So I believe that in K-12 education, there are some really strong, very creative, very intelligent and passionate people. I believe that teachers are probably the most hardworking individuals that we have across the country. And they need our support. They need our support in the pipeline as they are trying to become teachers. And they need our support in order to be retained and to continue teaching for many years to come.
Wow. Well, I also wanted to just dive into a deeper question just about the background knowledge of education that people may not know about. And that's the topic of, educational policies. We have parents and teachers and even students that may be listening to this podcast, and they might not know what educational policies are or what to look for or how to better inform themselves about things in education that are more, decisions are really made on the background or it's not on the forefront. So what advice or what can you share about educational policies that can enlighten parents and even teachers and students?
Sure. A policy is a rule that everyone must follow. A policy is different from a law because the law is created by a government entity, and a law is the same thing. It's a rule that everyone must follow. A policy is made by an institution or an organization, which is their rule for their employees or for engaging with their customers or their clients. There are policies that manage the school system. There are rules that are set for teachers. There are policies or rules that are set for student engagement, for curriculum, for instruction and assessment. They are either created by the main policymaking board, which is the Georgia Professional Standards Commission, which is the licensing board, or the Georgia Department of Education, which is another entity that is strongly connected to the government, but they're a policymaking authority. And those two policymaking bodies, they shape both the scope and sequence of curriculum, instruction, and assessment for the students in the state of Georgia and for across the country. And there are different policy bodies at different levels. There's also a federal United States Department of Education that sets policy for the entire United States. And what a lot of people don't understand is that we don't know about these policymaking authorities. We don't typically vote for them. So we don't vote for members who sit on the state licensing board. We don't vote for members who are over the State Department of Education or who work in that field. And so therefore, a lot of times what they do is beholden to more of either the governor or what they do may be beholden to the state superintendent. And that means that if you want to have some power over what happens in schools, what really happens in schools, not just individual circumstances with a teacher or principal or school, but looking holistically at what happens in terms of the system, then you're going to look at our state legislature, our state superintendent, because those are the people who give the directives to those who work in these policymaking bodies. And that is who they answer to. That is who they respond to. That is where the power lies. But there are rules, there are policies on what can be taught in the classroom. There are policies on who can become a teacher. There are policies on how much teachers can be paid. There's policies on COVID and the COVID response. And it's different at the local level. There is some local policy making rules and power, but a lot of it is filtered down from the state. And so for anyone who is out there, be parents or students or teachers, if you want to affect change and you want to affect change in a major way that's going to be systematic, you need to look at where the power lies.
It's interesting that you said you need to look at where the power lies. And it just kind of, as you were talking, I was just thinking about the different policies and the different things that, rules that educators have to abide by. And like you mentioned, even the pay. Do you think that is a cause of teacher retention and how teacher retention is like at a low rate?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. I really think that that's a part of it, but not the main part of it. Because most folks going into this field, they already know the pay. They know that they're not going to be paid a lot. They're in it for the money. Most of the people who are going into the education field, they already know that what they're driven by is their heart and their soul and their love for these students, and they want to make a change. They're more driven by inspiration and driven by making an impact than the money, right? The money is secondary to most of our pre-service teacher candidates, and most of the teachers in the school system, the money is secondary. They're driven by this inspiration and this will to change the system, and they're driven by social justice aims as well for a better future. What keeps them in the school system is the kids, despite the money, and what's pushing them out are the policies. What's pushing them out a lot of times when you talk to ELA, English language arts teachers or math teachers, they say that, well, I wanted to come in and I wanted to teach the children how to read and introduce them to poetry. And then I was given a scripted curriculum and I could not divert from that. And I had to only teach these books. I couldn't teach the other books. or we had to do language for a certain amount of time, and then we could never do social studies, which is what I wanted to teach them, which was culture and history. I was told I could not teach that. So we have policies that are actually pushing teachers more out of the field, as well as the working conditions. We have overcrowded classrooms. We have all the technology in the world, but we may not have extra desks. We have all the technology in the world, but we can't necessarily provide money for field trips. We can't provide money for books for some reason. So the students are not actually reading books in their English classes in some cases. They're reading little reading selections online in an online platform and downloading it on their tablets, but they don't have actual books and have never read a book for the entire year. So there is money for certain interests, and there's money for certain ideas on what type of education the students should receive. And a lot of times that runs counter to what the teachers feel is good teaching and learning. And so they leave and they say, I don't have to deal with this. I can go sell real estate. I can sell insurance. I can make a lot more money and not have the headache. And so I think it's two things. I think it's policies and it's working conditions that's driving so many teachers away, not necessarily the paycheck.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just thinking now, since we know what the issues are, and we've known what the issues, were for quite a while, what are some things that we can do, some practical things that we can do to encourage teacher retention and to support teachers? Because it starts with them first. A teacher has to be prepared and feel supported in order to give what they can give to the students as well as to their principal, to the administrators. And so, teachers answer to a lot of different people. So what are some ways that, the school systems can start improving as far as like what you said about the environment? What does that look like in real life? Like, what does that look like?
So I think that there are two things we can do immediately. One is we can start valuing teachers' wellness and their mental health days, and that when they are on lunch, they're on lunch. Do not bring other kids over for them to watch while they're taking their lunch. Don't invite them to a staff meeting while they're on lunch. We also need to respect their planning time. If there is a planning time that says you get 45 minutes a day to plan your lessons, don't interrupt them with a staff meeting. Don't give them a lot of paperwork that they need to complete. They need that time to plan. So what you're finding is a lot of times teachers are doing work on the weekends. They're doing work at home. They're working all the time because they're being asked to do after school tutoring. They're being asked many times to be available on the weekends. They're grading on the weekends. And then during the school day, they're being disrupted with either meetings or bringing students in who are unruly or having to do some other report or some other paperwork. Give them their school day to teach and allow them to plan and allow them to rest. If it's 3:15, they need to go. They need to recharge. We cannot keep them after school till 5 or 6 o'clock and then want them back in school at 7 a.m. to do it all over again. And a lot of people think, teaching is just an easy job. They get their summers off. They're out at 3 o'clock. Can you imagine having 30 12-year-olds in one classroom? 30 12-year-olds, managing them and then teaching them equations or teaching them the War of 1812 or teaching them biomes, keeping their attention and managing that classroom. And you have 30 12-year-olds. Many parents and many adults can't manage one 12-year-old. They're managing 30 in one classroom. Now multiply that by 6 periods in a day. And you get another 30 and another 30 and another 30. So there is a lot of stress that comes with teaching. We need school systems to put the mental health and wellness of teachers first and respect their time so that they are not burned out and they can be the best teachers for our kids. And we also need the school systems to respect planning time and do not interrupt the teachers' planning time, build it into the day so that they have time to grade, they have time to plan, and they have time to make the best lessons that are creative and engaging for our students. If they don't have that, Then you have teachers who are overwhelmed, they're disorganized. Students are sitting in a classroom and they're just waiting for the teacher to get things together because she didn't have time to prep. And if you're in a science class, you can't do any experiments. There's no time to prep. You cannot prep the stations. So we can't do science experiments. There's no time to prep. Our ELA teacher says, well, I can't give them all of these papers because I don't have time to grade 130 papers. I don't have that time. So if we want our students to be really strong in science, teachers need time to prep those lab stations. They need time to do it. If we want our students to be very strong writers, teachers need time to read and grade papers. Because the only way that you get better with writing is to do it often, to get feedback, revise, and do it again. That's the only way you're going to be a better writer. And you need teachers with the time and the patience to do that for you. If not, then you have a lot of students who are not reading and not writing and not doing science experiments. And that is what we are seeing in too many schools.
Well, it's so interesting that you had said that teachers need to clock out at 3:15. You know, they shouldn't, overextend their time because they need to reset. And I'm not sure where I've heard this from, but I've heard that, teachers, your day doesn't, end when the kids leave. You need to be a good teacher and stay for after school. And if you're a good teacher, you'll wait those hours, or you'll extend that time because it goes beyond, 7 to 3. And I feel like you're saying that's overworking. Like, would that really be quality? Waking up at 6 or 5 o'clock in the morning, going to your, prepping the class before, your homeroom class gets in, and going throughout the day, like you said, handling 30, minimum probably, because, a lot of schools are overcrowded. And then if some schools still decide to, well, I think all schools are doing face-to-face, but, even when they were doing virtual, that's a lot, that's, on top of having to attend to probably 20 kids on virtual and 10 kids in the classroom, having to go through all of that and then still expecting the teacher to be able to stay after the school hours, it's a lot. And so, like I said, I don't know where I've gotten that information from, and it's probably best that I don't know where. But
no, that's very common. It is very common. And in fact, in some cases at some schools I've worked at, when the teachers have left, at 3:15, after the students have gone, they have packed up their room, they've left, some other teachers sort of shame them. There are some principals will shame them and say, you're running out the door as soon as the students are gone and you're leaving. Like, you should be here. And that is sort of, they shame you into thinking that that's a good teacher when you are burning yourself out for 12 hours a day, and it does not work. And I tried to do that. My first couple of years of teaching, I tried to be the good teacher, and I was there 12 hours a day, and I was burned out after year 2, burned out. And I said, I have to change this. And when I began to do all my work during the school day and leave when the kids leave, and then take my summers off, that's another thing. Any teacher out there, it is not worth the money. Budget throughout the year, take your summer off to recharge. In the fall, I came back right as rain. But I did that because that was for my own mental health and wellness. Teachers are people too. And no one else can do our job. They can, whatever they say and whatever they talk about teachers and want to blame teachers for a lot of different things, they cannot go into that classroom of 12-year-olds and do our jobs. They can't do it. So that is so true. Yeah.
That is so true. And that's such a powerful statement. I'm so glad that you clarified this summer school. And I'm so glad that you said it's not worth it. It's not worth it, because I'm sure there are a lot of teachers that, may want to take the vacation hours off, but they're thinking like, oh, I got bills. And so, I'm so glad that you hit on that too. But I would like to go and just start, our last segment and our last question. This is also for, the listeners that don't really know the difference between, public schools, private schools, and charter schools. Would you mind just giving us a brief description of what a charter school is compared to a public school, just in case parents want to, not enroll their child into public school, but they want to have different options or different choices?
Sure. So charter schools are public schools. They are funded through public dollars. The difference between a charter school is that they are not managed by, in many cases, the direct overseeing of the school board. They have some flexibility in the rules that they can employ. They might have some flexibility on hiring, for example. They have some flexibility on student enrollment. They may require an entrance exam. They may require a certain GPA. They may be a themed charter school, science and math, and then they want the students to be able to demonstrate some sort of excellence in STEM fields before they can be admitted to the charter school. So what charters are they are a public school that is creatively organized in order to provide something that is new, different, or innovative in terms of schooling, and give the local kids in the area an option to get this new and different thing. And in exchange for doing something new and different, they get to be relaxed on different rules that the regular public schools may not be have that same flexibility. So to give you an example, is a charter school began recently. They're an all-male school, right? This is a public school. How can they be an all-male school? Because most traditional public schools have to enroll both males and females that are in their school district. Well, this is a charter school where a group of people came together and said, we have a creative and innovative idea. Our African-American males are not being successful in the local public school system. We want to create a school just for Black males. And our criteria is that you're just going to be a Black male. We want to do some flexibility in terms of hiring because we want to bring Black male teachers in who may not necessarily be certified, but they have a degree and they have cleared their background check. And so they are able to do something new, different, and innovative in exchange for some flexibility and the rules that maybe some other schools, traditional public schools, may have. What's the benefit of being in a charter school? Well, it depends. A lot of times the charter schools, like I said, they're a traditional public school. They still have to meet the criteria for accountability. They are not exempt from that. So there may be some flexibility in terms of hiring. There may be some flexibility in terms of admissions and curriculum. They still must meet the accountability system, meaning taking the Georgia Milestones test or their end of course test if you're here in the state of Georgia. Some charter schools do very well. They have this new, innovative, and creative idea. They have their flexibility, and their test scores are really, really strong and through the roof. Other charter schools do not do so well, right? They do not admit or do not serve students with special needs. They have issues about kicking students out who might be considered problem students. Their test scores are really poor. They're disorganized, or they're organized by an entity that's outside of the state. So they are a mixed bag. They do provide options that may be different from your traditionally zoned public school, but you need to look at them individually and not as a whole, because some are very good options and alternatives for students in the local public school zone, and then others are not.
Well, I just want to say thank you for that. I want to thank you for just all of the value added knowledge that you were able to give, not only just to me, but to our listeners. Thank you so much for being our special guest on today's episode. You have just completed the most recent episode of the EdYOUcate podcast. Thank you for listening to the most fired up educational podcast out. Tune in every first Wednesday of each month at 5 p.m. during the 2021 through 2022 academic year.